Hi, I'm Ben. Welcome to my book corner. It's Valentine's Day today, so I thought we would take a look at a book which you wonderful people voted for that has been described as a big gay rom-com with a heart. Today we are talking about Broken Hearts and Zombie Parts by William Hussey. This came out in May of 2023 and comes in at 400 pages long. As always, we shall talk about the story, the characters, the world building, and the presentation before I give my final thoughts at the end. So let's just jump straight in. Basic beats are pretty familiar here, but there's a few things that make this stand out. We're mainly following Jesse Spark. Jesse is a 17-year-old young man who is in year 12 of school, and it's post-prom, so there's only a few days of school left. Those of you across the pond, the way the UK school system works is you are in school till you are 16 years old, which is year 11, and then you go on to further education, be it college or apprenticeship, so on and so forth. Some schools do offer a partial college tutorship themselves. That would be year 12. And he's doing film studies. And the plan was, after the summer, for him to make Zombie Honeymoon as a film to help him get into film school. However, following a major cardiac arrest caused by finding his best friend, who is called Cass, kissing a girl behind the bins after prom, and that girl was not their girlfriend, and nearly getting battered by the football team, he has a cardiac event, and he discovers that he has a bicuspid aortic valve that will need replacing/repairing, and that will happen in 4 weeks' time. So he hatches a plan to basically do three things. The first is to go ghost hunting at Hunter's Lake with his two best friends, Cass and Morgan. The second one is to create, film, edit, and release his Zombie Honeymoon film. And the third one is to have his summer boyfriend experience, as he kind of is really worried that after this surgery, no one's going to want to look at him ever again because of the hideous scar he's going to have down his chest. So you have those three things, and the first of those never really gets mentioned in the book. So most of the book actually focuses, firstly, on the fact that he's making this film, and the second thing is he kind of falls for a boy who becomes the leading man for the film called Louis, who is Kaz's cousin. Now, on top of that, you do have a bit of splintering in the main friendship group. Kaz and Morgan themselves have a little bit of a chafing going on. You've got almost like the natural drift that you get at the end of school between best friends that really starts to play in his mind and really affects some of his friendships as well. And you do have this ticking time bomb in the back of everything that's going on in terms of him needing this surgery. Overall, it is a solid framework for the story. It adds a ticking clock, which sort of drives a little bit more of the importance along as well. Overall, though, this is a typical wanting to find that summer experience as a young teenager, that first experience, but feeling like you've got to get it done before things go wrong. And overall, it works well as a really strong framing device. In terms of characters, then, there are a number of characters to talk about. The obvious first one is Jesse. So Jesse is openly gay and is the son of a single mum whose dad passed away when he was very, very young, and he has no real memories of and no real knowledge of either. Not something his mum talks about. On his mum's side, she is very much the cool mum at school that everyone jokes about wanting to bag. She was 17, I think, when she had Jesse, so you get a little bit of needling going on there for that. And he is a massive film buff. Lots of little lines in here just show how fascinated he is with the cinematography and filmmaking, and horror in particular is very much his jam. Now, Kaz acts more as a cinematographer as well as being his best friend, and it is revealed in the book early on that Kaz is, or was, I should say, very much Jesse's early crush, but is described as being super straight. And all this story sort of kicks off when Kaz nearly gets battered for kissing another girl. And Kaz is very much the very, very reliable best friend. Not in the you're the coolest person in the school kind of way, but he's the sort of person that moves between the various different cliques and groups of the school and has never had any issues until what happened at prom. On top of that, you then have Morgan, who is the third of the trio of best friends. Morgan is a very talented young actress who has some body confidence issues. She is not the stereotypical svelte, slim, good looking in the traditional sense Hollywood star. And there's been a ongoing theme of Jessie and Kaz trying to build up her confidence because they believe that she is beautiful as she is. But she's gone through a crisis of confidence of, well, they're going to say that because they're my friends. This is something that is not helped by the fact that her family run a fitness business and are very critical of her body image. You then also have Brianna. Brianna was Kaz's girlfriend who he cheated on, and she has a very much a Mean Girls vibe. Very much the queen bee of a little group of reasonably unpleasant people who very much are the popular kids in school, so to speak. And finally, you have Louis. Louis is Kaz's cousin who has biceps and abs for days, and very quickly Jessie becomes very, very attracted to him. And this is someone who very much is on board coming to visit their cousin Kaz, and auditions for the role and gets the leading man role. Brianna gets leading lady because Morgan point blank refuses to do it because of the body image issues. And what you have here is a really interesting extra layer to the stereotypes that subverts the stereotypes that you quite often see. So Brianna is a good example of somebody who is shown as this pretty nasty person, or as at least perceived to be. And you sort of begin to realise that because of her home life is quite toxic, that it's very much a front that she uses to protect herself. Kaz has an older brother who's called Dean, who is, whilst I wouldn't say he's homophobic, he does use slurs to wind up Jessie in a what's supposed to be a banter sort of way, but obviously that has a massive effect on Kaz and less of an effect on Jessie at this point. And you have a number of other little side characters that seem to fit a very specific role, but there's another layer underneath that subverts this. And actually, it's the character work in here that really, really impresses. A big reason why I like this book as much as I do is because of the characters. And there's one character in here in particular that reminds me of what I was like when I was 16 to 19. So a little bit of a trip down memory lane in some regards. And overall, they all have very good journeys as well throughout the book. You have Jesse's journey as he begins to face up to what's coming up in terms of the changes to his life, and that might not necessarily mean the fears that he thought he has for it. You have Morgan facing her body confidence issues that have been caused not only by family but by other stuff as well. You have Kaz has a really interesting sort of drive as well, and some interesting stuff around Louis as well. So overall, probably the strongest point of this entire book actually is the characters. They are really lovable, and they have a surprising amount of depth as well. A lot of the world building here is built through the characterization of the individuals in the story, and a lot of it is to do with attitudes, and there is an underlying theme in here talking about the idea of stereotypes. So to use Jesse as a direct example, Jesse is a relatively normal looking young man who is incredibly messy. And there's a few little comments in here that sort of take digs at him because, well, gay people always look after themselves and always look well kept. I didn't think you were gay for so long because look at you. Because he is just messy and, you know, not the most hygienic of people. Compare that to his best friend Kaz, who is incredibly organised, incredibly well kept, never has a hair out of line, stuff like that. And you do have that sort of throughput going on to do with expectations. So again, Morgan with the expectation of what a Hollywood star would look like, and that is something that does play into her story, which we find out about towards the end, as well as the comments from her own family to do with her body image. And then you have the casual homophobia, for want of a better term, from various different characters, just taking these little pot shots. And whilst I don't necessarily think that it is homophobia itself, it is certainly ignorance on the part of some of these characters. And in the case of one character in particular, which is Dean, which is Kaz's brother, that does get addressed late on when Jesse finally snaps and points out that he doesn't really care what Dean says or what he thinks, but it's not just him that he's doing damage to, which I really, really do appreciate. In terms of physical world building, you have the sense of how expensive the film equipment is, as they try to borrow it from the school when the sort of person in charge of film is not there. But you don't get a huge amount past that. You do get the comments to do with social media and how insidious things like Instagram and so on have become in modern society. But that, again, is just like an observation rather than a commentary throughout. You get solid descriptions of some of the locations that they go to, but nothing too in-depth. You get the sense that this is a close-knit town, so very much a small English town, and it does feel quintessentially British as well. There's good descriptions of, like, there's a junkyard where they do some filming, an abandoned house, the school, and also the hospital. And interestingly enough, the hospital kind of gets the most time to act as a contrast to the rest of the story because of how cold and clinical it is compared to how warm and vibrant the cast of characters are, which does help really, really sort of boost their vibrancy throughout the story. So overall, not a massive amount of world building, and a lot of it is very passive, but it is all in relation to the story and does add more than it takes away. So in terms of presentation then, this is very British in its sense of, and there is a lot of sarcasm in here, a lot of self-deprecation. Well, straight off when I started reading this, I did wonder what the hell I was in store for, because this is a YA romance. I'm going to read the first chapter for you so you get a sense of what this book's like. 18 hours after the mythic disaster that was prom, here I lie, naked apart from this flimsy gown, a hairy man-mountain leaning over me, caressing my chest. Okay, so that might sound like some weird sex dungeon thing. It really isn't. A weird sex dungeon wouldn't be this scary. And that's how the book starts off, and I did wonder where the hell we were going to go with this. And then you very much get the interactions between Jesse and the doctor, and with Jesse's mum there as well. And you get the self-deprivation, you get the really nervous kid who's, when asked a simple question like, how did you get here, reams off the full story of everything that happened rather than, well, I collapsed because my heart started doing weird things and then I got brought here. He tells the entire story from, well, I was at prom and then I saw this and then I saw this. And you actually have this moment where the doctor looks at mum and goes, you always like this? And she goes, yeah, pretty much. And his reaction is, oh yeah, I'm sorry for you. And you have that form of humour all the way through. Now, this does have a fair amount of cursing in here as well, which I don't think is out of place due to the fact you are following UK kids who are 16 to 18 years old. And to be honest, this encapsulates what I class as British language perfectly. There's a starting of chapter 9 where you bloody massive bell end is how a chapter starts. And I don't know why, but that just feels quintessentially British to me. But overall, this is written with very good humour. It is pretty well paced. There is a little bit of sag in the second quarter of the book. I'm not quite sure why I felt that, as once I went back to it, I sort of fell into it straight away. But overall, it is well paced. It keeps the idea of the surgery and the sort of race against time forefront and centre whilst the various different dramas unfold. You also have everything from Jesse's point of view, and Jesse is not the most reliable narrator in some things, and you get the sense and the frustration as he doesn't understand what's going on with his friends because they won't talk to him. And this is a case where you do kind of have the miscommunication trope going on, but it makes sense for what this story is trying to do and the character arcs that are going on. So in that regard, it actually works really, really well. On top of that, you have the very, very typical sort of, that's a bit shiny, cutesy style artwork on the front. Don't have a huge amount to say about that. I do like the alteration to the font for the actual title itself. Overall, I think this is a very enjoyably written book. I think the cover art is perfectly fine, but I do appreciate the humour more than anything else in here. So overall, I give this book 4.25 stars out of 5. I really like the humour in here. I like the fact that the characters are, first of all, overall very, very lovable, and as well as the fact they have a surprising amount of depth. But also, the messaging in this book is quite important because there is very subtle messaging around the facts of what you say to people can have massive effect, especially in terms of younger people, because you do have comments in here that are poorly educated homophobic comments, you have body image comments, and you see the effects that that has on people within the story. And it does highlight the fact that these things do still go on, and sometimes that needs to be confronted, and it does get confronted in the book very successfully, as well as people realize that even if they didn't mean it being nasty, which in some cases they didn't, it can still have a really negative effect, and actually some things just shouldn't be said anymore. Well, that's my thoughts on Broken Heart Zombie Parts. Have you read it? If you have, what do you think of it? Let me know in the comments below. I will catch you all very soon.